Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl Polk, and I'll be presenting an examination of social media in the workplace. This topic has particular relevancy for me as I'm working on developing a social media policy for my employer, which is the Ontario Police Department in Southern California. So a presentation will touch on current popularity of social media, the presence in the workplace as of now, potential uses or advantages to allowing social media in the workplace, some pitfalls and concerns regarding social media, legal issues, and finally recommended practices regarding social media. So culturally, I think we're all aware of how prevalent social media is in our lives now. According to a Nielsen report from third quarter 2011, social media blogs now reach 80% of Americans, which is up 50% from 2008. And Americans spend more time on Facebook than any other U.S. website, and nearly 4 out of 5 internet users visit social media sites, so it's become very prevalent for internet usage. And close to 40% of social media users now access their social media content from their phones, and I'm going to address that in a couple of slides and the impact that has on the workplace. So as far as workplace presence goes, the information I found in my research showed that 79% of hiring managers and job recruiters had reviewed online information about prospective employees, and 75% of companies had some type of policy in place requiring an online search of prospective employees. So employers are using social media as a background tool for vetting potential employees. It's also becoming part of the core business model for industries like healthcare and education, where social media allows for immediate outreach to large groups of patients or students. And as an example, I'll give you the NU Commons campaign that National University recently launched, which ties into Facebook. So on the smartphone category, this Nielsen report indicated, as you see here, that social networking app usage is up 30% from third quarter 2010. And this gives a lot of information here, but the information that I keyed in on most was down here. And what that shows is that the largest block of age users engaging in smartphone social media applications are of working age. They're 25 to 44-year-olds, which means these are people that are probably using their phones to access social media while they're at work. And I think that to a degree that shows how unrealistic it may be to consider just pulling social media altogether. I don't know exactly how, as an employer, we would implement a policy forbidding somebody from accessing social media on their cell phone unless we forbid them to have cell phones. So we'll touch on that in a little bit. When it comes to these hiring practices that I mentioned earlier, there are some cautionary advisals out there from research, specifically regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. Many employers, as I've indicated, use social media for background checks, and it's very easy to stray into territory where you may be dealing with a discrimination issue based on the information that you found. I also found some practices which have been frowned upon by the courts and also simply by the business community, forcing candidates to surrender their passwords or demanding they log into their accounts in the presence of somebody who's a potential hiring agent. On the flip side, there's also a negligent hiring issue, where if an employer finds out too much about an employee or finds out about a practice or a social activity that they're engaged in, there's a court ruling in this Ponticus versus KMS that there's an element of liability that's predicated on negligence of an employer in placing a person with known propensities in a position which posed a threat of injury to others. So the example I would give is an employer hiring somebody that they saw on social media, drank fairly heavily, and if there's any type of incident involving them drinking on the job, that could be connected as a negligent hire for the employer because they were aware of that activity beforehand. There are also the more traditional cautionary practices which deal with leakage of confidential information, IT security risks, and how social media policies are applied. A specific case that we were involved in is a Supreme Court case involving one of our sergeants, Sergeant Kwan versus City of Ontario, and that dealt specifically with right to privacy on information obtained from city-issued equipment. In this case, it was the late 90s. It was text pagers. For those of you under 25, before we had texting at phones, they used to actually have two-way pagers that you could text from pager to pager. And our sergeants were issued them by the city. There was an internal affairs case, and one of our sergeants had his text brought into the investigation. Even though he was exonerated in the investigation, he made some unflattering remarks about administration, and those remarks were called into question, and he ended up suing. And ultimately what happened, the Supreme Court ruled that the city, it ruled in favor of the city and advised that the city had the right to access information generated and received on his device that was owned by the city. However, the interesting part is that they acknowledged that they did not want this case used as a reference case for future issues regarding social media and content in the workplace. And I think that was just a nod towards how technology would be changing over time and how the lines are going to be blurred between what's personal and professional as far as information usage in the workplace. So, at the tail end of this, some organizational recommendations that I would make are implementing some type of a social media policy and having that social media policy be comprehensive, accessible, and clear to all organization members. And with that in mind, the idea would be that restriction isn't always the answer. A well-regulated is not the same as forbidden. It's not the idea that we're going to forbid our employees or prevent them from accessing it, but have some type of policy that addresses some of the key issues that do arise with social media. And in my research, I found that there are some companies out there that have implemented effective social media policies and have seen improvements in their brand building, have seen improvements in recruiting, and are actually using it for development of employees and improved employee engagement. This is from a Manpower survey in 2009. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I appreciate your patience. I apologize that I had to do this as a pre-recorded, but my computer's been acting up. So I will be available for any questions if you have any. Thank you all very much.